Good evening, good evening. Welcome to Talking with Dr. T, conversations on bridging the gap between faith and mental health. I am your host, Dr. Tanya Marie Tinsley. There are seasons in life that are not easily explained, quickly resolved, or neatly understood. Seasons marked by illness, uncertainty, and the quiet weight of simply trying to make it through each day. This conversation tonight is especially personal for me. On the day before my mother's funeral this past November, my dad and I received news that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, with the cancer having spread beyond the prostate bed into his lymph nodes and his back. While he is now in treatment, praise God, and we are grateful to see signs of progress, this has been a season of both grief and ongoing uncertainty. There is no cure for stage 4 cancer, just controlling. And I know we are not alone in that. In this episode of Talking with Dr. T, we engage a deeply honest conversation about faith, suffering, and what it means to be sustained in different seasons. Joining me tonight is my friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Larry L. Anderson, Jr., a pastor, educator, author, and leader deeply committed to serving both the church and the broader community. A North Philadelphia native, Dr. Anderson serves as the senior pastor of Great Commission Church, where he has led with a vision for holistic ministry and community impact. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Bible and Christian Leadership from Cairn University, and both a Master of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry from Missio Seminary, where we both met. In addition to his pastoral leadership, he has served in higher education, helping to develop urban ministry training, and currently works with the Baptist Resource Network, supporting and strengthening churches across Pennsylvania and South Jersey. Tonight, we explore Dr. Anderson's powerful new book, in which I became aware of in December, The Cancer Diaries, the unfiltered truth of survivors and caregivers' journeys toward healing and hope. Through raw reflections and lived testimony, this work gives voice to the realities of illness, caregiving, and the emotional and spiritual complexity that often accompanies them. Together, we will consider what it means to hold on to faith when life does not resolve quickly, when healing is uncertain, and strength must be renewed daily. This conversation tonight invites us to reimagine faith not as a means of avoiding suffering, but as an anchor that steadies us, a presence that accompanies us, and a practice that helps us carry what feels too heavy to hold. Dr. Anderson, welcome once again to Talking with Dr. T.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm very excited for you to be here, but I also look at this as a blessing. So thank you for being here. This whole book has been a blessing, and I am grateful for this book. And before we get started with talking about the book, why don't you share again with our listening audience your previous books, but then also talk about the Diaries series, because this is not the first Diaries in the series that you have.
Yeah, that's correct. I have 3 books previous to this one. Ask Me Why I'm Not in Church, The Pastor's Diaries, and The Pastor's Wives' Diaries. And in fact, The Pastor Kids' Diaries was supposed to be the next in the series of the Diary series, but the Lord and health had a different plan. And so in the Pastor's Diaries, is a transparent journey of a pastor's journey of what it really feels like to be behind that sacred desk and all that comes along with that. And is me accompanied by about 20 plus other pastors. When I did that, there was a cry of what about the wives and what they go through. And so I explored that subject. And as I said, the children was next, but cancer kept rearing its ugly head. Not only my 2 battles, but best friends and family who experienced these journeys. And it was like, I can't just go on with business or the series as usual. I had to interrupt it to deal with this very troubling, scary disease that needed to be dealt with, needed to be talked about. There's people who needed healing And so the Cancer Diaries kind of trumped everything and made its way to the forefront.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe you started talking about it in December and that's when I reached out to you because you had no idea what was going on in my life. And so
Right.
being able to talk to you and just have the support from you has been very helpful. And I think this interview for tonight is going to be also therapeutic, not only for me, but my dad will be watching as well, and anybody else who is going through this experience. Let's talk about the book. You've talked about your battle twice with cancer, and other people that you know, caregivers, cancer survivors. Tell us about how the book is written, but also before you get to the how, talk about if you're willing to share your journey.
Well, yeah, I through regular checkups, my wellness check, my regular physical exam annually. As a African American man, they ask us to test ourselves early for prostate because we are prone to get it more than any other individual. And so the PSA number, which is a detector of prostate cancer, began to rise. There was a 4-year rising journey before they actually found cancer in my body. And so they found cancer in my body just prior to my 50th birthday. I was happy to find it after the journey of just hearing that I might have it because I wanted to battle it. I had a prostatectomy, which is having your prostate removed. But prior to that, it was, hey, let's just watch it. Let's just watch it. Let's just watch it and see what happens. And my sister, who is a breast cancer survivor, really pushed me. You got to be your own advocate. She said, you got to ask for second opinions. You got to push for the biopsy. You got to push for treatment. And so she really pushed me for advocacy, where most of us, if they say, hey, don't worry about it, we'll look at it, just come back, we'll go with that. But she was like, no, don't just go with that. Push them. And because she said that, and because I pushed them, I was like, no, I want to just go ahead and have it removed. And they was like, well, you don't have to do this right away. And I was like, yeah, but, one of the things I thought about is I care about people for a living, and I was like, if somebody told me they got a cold or the flu, in my mind, it'd be like, yeah, okay, but I got cancer. So I'm like, I could never really focus on you or care about you if I'm constantly thinking about me. And so it was like, yeah, let's go ahead and get this out. And when they went in, they discovered I was not at stage 1. They did not catch it early. I was at stage 3. It had gotten out of my prostate. And so, they was like, oh, it was great that you were an advocate. It was great that you made this decision. And I still got the voicemail of them telling me that it was at stage 3 versus 1. And it was because of my advocacy that we found it. And so for 2 years, from 2018 to 2020, I was getting checkups every 6 months every 3 months at that point to find out, whether or not it was detected, and it wasn't. But then 2 years later, boom, here it comes again. And I was truly floored to have it a second time. It was like, you go in and you're thinking you're well, and all of a sudden you find out, no, they still found some more cancer in your body. I was floored that time even more than I was the first time because they say that the scariest thing about cancer is it coming back, because by that time it done discovered your body and the defenses and all of these things. And so again, here comes 7 weeks of radiation treatment, 34 treatments I had, and went through that process. And now that was over 5 years ago. And so I'm in my 6th year of it being undetected on this side of it. To God be the glory. But yeah, that has been the journey, medical journey. Yeah. But as you know, there's an emotional journey that goes along with that medical journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about the emotional and the intersection of, biblical, theological, psychological. What did you come to understand about God and about yourself through this journey that you could have not learned any other way?
Oh, well, I think I had never been and I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but a humanistic way. I had never been so down, so discouraged, so frightened, so worried, so face to face with my mortality, and thus my dependency on the Lord as I was going through this journey. I had to come to face with, do you really believe the message that you've been given? Do you really believe to live as Christ and to die as gain? Do you believe that God is Jehovah Rapha, the healer? Do you believe that He can do all things? And so I really had to come to grips with, how do I get up? How do I continue to press on? How do I not crawl up in a ball? Things that I've been telling people for years, as a pastor, like, do you believe or not? Do you trust Him or not? Do you forget what the doctor said? What did God say? It's so easy to preach it. It's a whole nother thing to actually live it. Absolutely. And so I had to live it. And it I think it made me more empathetic. As a person, as a pastor. It made me recognize that, sometimes you can't spiritualize some things away. Sometimes therapy helps. Sometimes you're going through an emotional place where you have to deal with the trauma of the moment, not just a medical thing, but what it's doing to you mentally. And I had to come to grips with all of that. I had to minister to myself, which I had not had to do probably in my life. As a believer, I've never had to go that deep in my faith in order to get through my journey.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And you have other people that shared their stories, right? Whether it was cancer survivors, caretakers. And I found that as I was reading it, I said, oh, it wasn't just my dad and I. It just wasn't my sister. It wasn't my dad. And so there was a common thread that just really having to rely on that faith, right? I am wondering, when we talk about this faith, we know the powerful line that faith is not the absence of pain, but the anchor that steadies us through it. Absolutely. How did your understanding of faith take shape for you, especially when the pain felt overwhelming?
Well, I mean, it really was the grounding in the scriptures. It really was a crisis of, do you believe or not? It was a constant meditation and reciting of the scriptures to myself, and walking on to them and holding on to them. And really, I think I really had to come to grips of accepting, the possibility of death and being all right with it. Like, you have to come to that place that I believe what I believe, what I believe. And I know that God is in control. I'm not going to step out of here until He says so. But when He says so, it's going to be all right, because I know where I'm going. I had to come to grips with that, and it really wasn't about me worried about where I was going. It was really about me. Did I set things up well enough to, for those who I'm leaving behind, for my wife, for my children, like them, because and I've said this a million times. I always thought about, am I going to walk my daughter down the aisle? Am I going to be able to actually give her away one day? Like, am I going to see that come to fruition? Those were the things that I thought about. I mean, holidays, I'm so melancholy. Is this the last Christmas? Is this the last birthday? Is this the last thing? And I'm looking around the table at my family, trying to hold back the emotion of a potential departure, but I had to trust God. I had to keep coming back to trusting God that He got them, what I mean? That He got me and He got them. And if He chooses for me to come with Him, then somehow, and on the front cover of my book, I got Romans 8:28, for somehow all these things going to work together for the good, because I love Him and I've been called according to His purpose. And so that's where I ended up at. I ended up that God is in control and all things going to work together for the good.
Absolutely. I'm going to pause right there. So let's let our readers kind of understand the format of the book. I really love it, because there are different chapters, but let's talk about how you designed each chapter.
Well, I mean, I walked through the book with a journey of sharing. Not only do I and so many in my family had it, I go through this process of not just me and how I came to discover it, because I didn't want it to be just about me or just about prostate cancer.
Right.
I wanted it to, and as you've seen in the book, there's a plethora of cancers. There's men, there's women, there's young, there's old, there's black, there's white. Like, we all are stricken by this disease. And so working it out in such a way where we recognize, yes, there's a crisis of faith. Yes, there's a physical thing, but yes, there's also an emotional thing that we have to go through. And then there's people who are going through it with us that are sometimes missed and ignored. And so I really wanted the caregivers to be a part of this, because they have a story too. They have a journey too. They have everything but the disease. But my wife is sitting there. She's on the other side wondering, am I going to be widowed? Am I going to have to raise my kids alone? I have parents who looking at their children with cancer. I got children looking at their parents with cancer. Like, so the whole gamut is discussed. But for me, the caregiver is so important. And for me, it was birthed out of guilt, to be honest. When my mom was sick, my mom had Alzheimer's, and she had cancer as well, but she had Alzheimer's. But when she had the Alzheimer's, and she would repeat herself and she would forget, she would say, it just killed me inside. Like, I couldn't handle it. Towards the end of my mom's life, I started weaning myself off of my mom just so I can deal with her death when it came. Me and my mom was the best of friends. I mean, I love the ground she walked on. I loved her to death. And people would ask, how did you preach your mom's funeral? I had already mourned my mom while my mom was here, right? So I was able to stay up, but I wasn't strong enough to be her caregiver. I wasn't strong enough to stand by her and care for her as she began to fade. My sister actually had to move my mom from Philadelphia to North Carolina to care for her. She was stronger than I was, and she was able to care for her because I just couldn't do it. So when I got to this place and I knew, and I felt guilt about that process, not being able to do it, but it also made me recognize the strength it takes to be a caregiver, and the pain and the trauma and the emotional turmoil that caregivers go through. So I wanted to give them their due. I wanted to invite them into the book and let them share their story because I failed in that, way at a certain point in time in my life.
Yeah. And I like that because each chapter is designed. So I'll just kind of give discovering cancer. So then you talk about your discovery, and then you have your guests that come in and talk about the discovery, either as a caretaker or as the survivor. And then I really like the last part of that section, each section, unplug for uplift, right? Talk a little bit about the unplug for uplift.
Well, uplift is one of the Omega Psi Phi cardinal principles. Let me send a shout out. But uplift is, it's heavy, and I can't pretend that it's not heavy. I don't think the book is sad at all, but I think it's heavy. And so the unplug for uplift is really this idea of, hey, don't try to read this whole, it is an easy read. And I do the diaries for people who don't read books. Right. That part of, my strategy has always been short stories. If you can read a short story, you can do a diary a day, like a devotion. But when you go through it, I don't want you to go through it and get sad or get depressed. So it's like, hey, take a minute, unplug for uplift. Here's some scripture. Here's some encouraging words. Here is how God is continually work in spite of being in the valley. You're not in the valley alone. The God who said, I never leave and never forsake, he's right there. And so every chapter has that unplug for uplift so that you could be encouraged as you're going through this journey, whether or not you are going through it as a patient, as a caregiver, as somebody who's loving on somebody who's a patient or caregiver.
Right. That's right. Now that we brought the caregiver, the patient, yourself, you mentioned something, and I want to make sure that our listening audience understand this. Understanding or discovering cancer Going through the process of cancer, whether it's a caretaker, it's traumatic for everyone involved. I want you all to know it's traumatic. You can experience a gamut of emotions, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, having those existential angst of why are we going through this? When is this going to happen? So the trauma is real, right? So when you have a chapter that's called Emotions Overload and Babe, I'm Tired, and it reflects on the very honest emotional experience. So why is it important from both a faith and mental health perspective to name those feelings rather than suppress them?
Oh, that's it. Yeah. The idea of like, there's so many people, and I'm talking about right now, since the book, they be like, man, I ain't even trying to go back there. I ain't even trying to deal with that. I ain't even trying. So there's so many people who want to suppress it. They don't want to talk about it. I ain't even trying to, they don't realize that just not talking about it, it don't mean you're healed from it.
Right.
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 That's why, this song come on, or this memory come up, or this movie come on, and you just boo-hoo and can't be controlled because you have not dealt with that trauma in your life. Naming that trauma, dealing with that trauma, understanding what it was, and again, I pastorally, I thought I was the strong. I don't know anybody strong as me. That's how I would have came at you. But I realized, that no, you've been through some stuff, man. You know what I mean? And I felt an abandonment. You know what I mean? Where is God? I felt, I was angry. Why would you let me? Man, I done dedicated my whole life to serving you. Why would you let me, get this? Like, there's so many people who you could have gave this to. But so there was an anger, and then there was a grief of who I used to be, what I used to can do, what I now have to alter. Grief ain't just about death, it's about loss. What did I lose in this battle? You know what I mean? And this new normal that you have me dealing with. So there's a whole lot of emotion. And for me, writing is therapeutic. So to write it out, to get it out, to call it what it is, and then if I don't do that, then I can't really be healed from it. If I don't acknowledge, what I mean, what I've been through, then I can't treat what I've been through. And so we pretend that we okay, we're masked that we okay, or we do some things when we're not feeling okay to make us feel okay, but we don't deal with what we actually dealt with.
Right. Yeah. And here's the thing I'm going to add now. I'm going to go back and connect to something you said. Cancer, I don't care what type of cancer, whether it's breast cancer or blood cancer, prostate cancer, stomach cancer, all of which are discussed in the book, right? It's an equal opportunity illness. It does not discriminate on religious denominations, age, race. I'm reading the 28 years old and just got called into the ministry and just got into a church, right? And I think it's really important to understand it can happen to anyone. And it's not just grieving the loss of a physical person. It's a loss of a lifestyle. It's a loss of this idea of how you thought your life was going to be. It could even be for some who become caretakers, feeling out like they're losing their life now, having to caretake for another person. Absolutely. So we got to name it: grief and loss and trauma, depression, anxiety. It's real. So you talked about counseling and therapy. Talk about that process for you and even for those that were contributors to your book.
Well, there was a time, and you and I talked about this, before. There was a time where I just thought that why would you need a counselor if you got a pastor? Why would you need a counselor if you got your Bible? Why would you need to deal with therapy? And then, I realized, so many times, pastoral, we trying to get you through the day. We're trying to get you through the moment. We don't have time to go back and look at what was that moment of trauma for you and then walk you through like we don't normally have that kind of time, or to be honest, that skill set, but I know for me that to understand triggers, to understand the unresolved, to understand the burial of certain emotions, because I dealt with that and I had to go through therapy to you got this thing, I had compassion fatigue, because you grow weary caring for other people. And then when you don't feel appreciated in the process, you're angry. You
Yeah.
know, you're like, where is my life? And what about me? You know, so you got that, you know, but I also, you know, besides the compassion fatigue, I had delayed grief because I would not allow myself to actually be in the moment, you know, and so that puts you on edge. That make you bitter. That makes you a little less tolerant of
Yeah.
others. And so there's so many unresolved feelings and emotions and things that go on when you don't sit down and unpack it. And sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones that you can't see. You
Yes.
know, it's easy to see a broken arm and a broken finger and you know, a cut on your eye, but those things, those emotional wounds, you
Yeah.
know, we don't see them, so we hide them, you know, from others, and we tend to hide them from ourselves, and we'll walk with the limp, you know, and not acknowledge the pain that's causing the limp, right? And
Absolutely.
so, you know, for us, you know, especially, I mean, for people of color,
Right.
for forever, we made it a stigma that if you dealing with some type of mental, emotional issues, right,
Right.
that, oh man, we calling it crazy, you got a problem, you know, there's a stigma with it. So we're like, no, that's not for us. That's for the other people. They need to talk to somebody. No, we all need to talk to somebody. We,
Absolutely.
we all need to talk to somebody because we all been going through some stuff, and it doesn't help us or anybody around us if we are ignoring it and not actually dealing with it.
Absolutely. And you said it because I want you to think about our listening audience. Think about life like an onion. You know how when we cut an onion, it's got the different layers?
Absolutely.
There could be grief and loss. We're dealing with what's going on in our political and cultural and economic. That's impacting the cost of gas and the cost of groceries. And we're dealing with grief. And how do I take care of my, all of that can compound. And so you got to have a space to talk about it. And I also
Absolutely.
want to make sure the caretakers, they understand you have to have a space, right, to talk about it.
Absolutely.
So what did you learn about the emotional and spiritual weight caregivers carry, and what support do you think that they often need that they don't receive?
Well, I think you know what I learned from my own wife, who wrote in a book,
Yes.
who did not paint a good picture of me as a patient. You know, I think sometimes, like for caregivers, they had to realize that the person,
Yeah.
you know, is really wishing that you didn't have to care for them.
Yeah.
Like that, like when you're going through this, you need somebody to care for you, but you wish you weren't in a position to have it. So
Yeah.
you're not the most pleasant to care for.
Yeah.
And so that person who's caring for you, many times, you know, they get the worst of you
Yeah.
while they're doing it. And you're the person they love the most. That's why they're your caregiver, right? And so they're doing everything for you. They stop putting on their own oxygen mask first, so they're not caring for themselves, you know,
Right.
and so they begin to resent you, resent God, resent their situation, you know, many times. And if they don't have an outlet, if
That's
they
right.
don't have somebody to talk to about it, because they're scared, you know, I mean, again, who my wife gonna talk to about me? You
Yeah.
know, I can't
Yeah.
talk to nobody at church, tell them how much pastor getting on my last nerves. Who
Right.
do I talk to about this man, right?
Right.
But many times, you know, they don't know who they can talk. Where's a safe place? Well, you know,
That's
for
right.
me, I'm big on get counseling, get therapy, get a safe place to talk
Yeah.
about what you're going through, so
Yeah.
that their cancer don't become your cancer, right?
Absolutely.
And I mean that, like, they're your person,
Yeah.
right? But yo, I'm gonna tell you that you know what stress can do.
Right.
You know, both of y'all end up sick because
Yeah.
y'all both going through this process, but neither one of you going through it in a healthy way. So when I look at caregivers, like, yo, you got to make sure that you are caring for you, so
Yeah.
that out of the overflow you can care for them, as opposed to out of your emptiness,
Yeah.
you're caring for them.
Yeah, I love it. And I want to reiterate to our listening audience, when you work with a trained professional, a licensed clinician, I don't care if they're a social worker, a professional counselor, marriage and family therapist, everything you talk about is confidential. It's private, unless they're concerned about your safety or someone else's. So you have a safe space to talk about those things that are happening
Mm.
in here, that you might not be able to talk about out there. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And I want to say this for our caregivers, because the caregivers, you got to take care of yourself. And so it's my hope. I have a daily mantra for our listening audience, for those who are caregivers. Boundaries are not barriers, they are protection. Setting boundaries is not about shutting people out, it's about stewarding your emotional and spiritual space with wisdom and intention.
Mm.
Even as a caregiver, you got to set boundaries. You know that gone is that saying, you can't fill from an empty cup, because if you have a
Mm.
half a cup and you give it to the person you're caring for, you're still left on empty. You got to
Mm.
set boundaries and say, I can only fill from an overflowing cup. So are
Mm.
you stewarding your emotional and spiritual space with wisdom and intention?
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. That's
Yeah.
good.
I just want to say some other mantras real quick. Faith, we talked about faith. It's not
Mm.
always about being delivered from the moment, it's about being sustained within it. And healing does not always mean cure, but it can mean presence, peace, and strength, right?
Mm.
So you
Mm.
mentioned witnessing faith being shaken and then strengthened. How
Hmm.
can individuals hold on to faith in seasons where it feels fragile, uncertain, or even questioned?
Well, I think part of it is trying to not navigate the journey alone.
Mhm.
I know for me, having a support system, for me, even going public, like even doing the L's Cancer Chronicles on YouTube, which I did. I walked this journey out. Is a video docu series where I got up and I'm on a tread and I'm reading scripture with my family. I'm giving a feedback of what took place during the course of the day. I got a chapter called COVID and chaos and cancer, COVID, and chaos. Because it was during COVID when I was going through this process, but I was documenting it because the second time, like I said, it was such an emotional hit that if I didn't have an outlet,
Mhm.
um, it was COVID. So you couldn't be with people,
Yeah.
so it became everybody asked me, how you doing? How you doing? And you don't like to repeat it. So it's like, how do I document this in a way where I can tell them, because I can't be with them, I can't see them, I got a mask on, I'm being dropped off at Fox Station, nobody could go in with you. You just going through this. It felt like a movie. It felt like where we already COVID already was like a movie, but then you got cancer, the isolation of nobody understands what I'm going through, like all those things is happening,
Yeah.
right? That if you don't have an outlet to share that, you would lose your mind. You're like, how do
Right.
it's so easy to fall into depression
That's
when you
right.
don't have no outlet to deal with that. But you know
Right.
I think about Moses having Aaron and her. Moses, the greatest leader there was, in the Bible, but he needed Aaron and her to hold his arms up so he could stay connected to God, during the course of this battle. And
Yes.
so for me, it was like, I gotta have people that's praying for me and lifting me up and holding me and making myself accountable so I don't fall in these places. And
Right.
the truth, if I need that, and I'm transparent enough to say I needed support system, I needed prayers, I needed people to be with me, then I'm like, who can say they don't? Like, and why pretend to not? Because this is healthy. That's why we have community, so
That's
that we
right.
can go through things together. That's why you have those people around you. And sometimes we can keep them out because we want to be private and we don't want people to know our business, but we don't realize how much we are hurting ourselves by
Yes.
keeping them out and how much we are hurting them by not letting them in.
Absolutely.
Those are those moments where you
Yeah.
need that kind of community, that kind of support.
Yeah. Anybody who's listening, caretakers, those that may have received the diagnosis, or even those who are afraid to go and get a test, right? I don't care whether it's a mammogram or whether you got to get your prostate checked, you're not alone, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned something, and I want to go back to this idea. You mentioned this. You've gone through this twice, right? And
Absolutely.
stage three. Um, when my dad found out he had stage 4, he had his prostate removed years ago, and they didn't have the clean edges around the prostate bed, right?
Mm,
So when he started his treatment, and his PSAs went down, the numbers went down. And I was at the
mm,
doctor with him, and I was like, yay, wonderful. And the doctor said, now I just want to remind you, the PSAs are gone, but we have not cured the cancer. Those
mm.
numbers can go back anytime. And so I have to remind myself there's no cure for the cancer, right? But that right now it can be controlled. So I
Mm.
just want to ask you, in a culture that often equates healing with cure, how has this journey expanded your understanding of what healing really means emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically?
Well, part of the um, misnomer is this idea that when you ring the bell is over, right?
Mhm.
And I remember when I was going through the radiation treatments and the people ringing the bell and everybody cheering in the hall. And I remember being at Fox Chase and I asked it, I said, hey, what does that ringing a bell mean? Like, how do we know this working? How do you get it? They like, well, ringing a bell is the end of your treatment.
Mm.
But everybody got this idea that ringing the bell means, oh, I'm cancer free or I'm healed.
Right.
It just means this part of the treatment is over. And to every 6 months I go in, I get checked, and I'm waiting on this teleconference. I go to Fox Chase, get blood in the morning. In the afternoon, I'm on this teleconference, and me and my wife are sitting there holding hands when she comes on, and we're sitting there. How you doing? I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm good. I don't want no small talk. Let's just get to,
That's
you
right.
know,
That's right.
and they come back and they say, and this is what you'll hear me say over and over in the book: the cancer's undetected.
Yes.
They told me we'll never say that you're cancer free.
Right.
We'll tell you that cancer is undetected, right?
Yes.
Meaning we don't see it. And you got to live with it being undetected, right?
Yes.
And so you discover, and this, for me, two kinds of people. There's some people who's dying from cancer, and
Right.
there's some people who's living through cancer,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I choose to be one that's living through cancer,
Through cancer.
right? And so how you mentally hold that, perceive that, I
Right.
remember being in there and they said, you come in and you seem hype and this and that. They like, that's a good thing, because we realize that most people who have faith or hope get through this a whole lot better than those who don't.
Right.
And that's a reality. They ain't say Christ, they just said those who have faith, because that's all they know from that perspective, but the reality is, if you're not walking through it in a way that understands,
Yes.
that this is a physical thing, this is an emotional thing, this
Yes.
is a spiritual thing, and I got to make sure that I'm healthy on each of these levels. It's
Yes.
not just about my physicals, because my mental done been through something. My
Right.
emotional done been through something. And
Right.
I've been through a spiritual ride, right?
Yeah.
I'm not the same spiritually that I
Right.
was prior to this.
Right.
I am so much stronger now,
Yeah.
right, than
Yeah.
I was then. Now, I thought I was strong then. Trust
Mhm.
me. I
Yeah.
thought I was strong then. I thought I had faith, and on Christ, the solid rock I stand,
Yeah.
all of the ground. I could have gave it to you, right? But when you go through
Yeah.
what you go through and you
Right.
get through, you just become a different person. You become, and I don't wish it on nobody. I wish I didn't have it. But you
Right.
want to talk about a faith journey,
Yeah.
right? Nothing increases faith like a crisis of faith, or nothing breaks faith like a
Yeah.
crisis of faith. You
Yeah.
realize where you are
Yeah.
in your walk when you go through, valleys such as this,
Yeah.
you know?
And I appreciate you talk about undetected, because I think about you mentioned you got to go back and get your blood work, right? And this past Friday, my dad had his appointment. PSA levels are dull. So I'm thinking, good. He's saying, we can maybe space out the appointment.
Mm,
Still got to come back in, right? And
right.
not only for the blood work, but getting the scans, right? So
Mm,
you got to
mhm,
continually engage. So I just want, let's talk to our men who are listening right now. Talk
mm,
to them about the importance of going to the doctor, getting tested for your prostate?
Well, for the prostate is men, we don't like it. We don't like the test. We don't like the process. But it's not about what we like. It's about what we need to survive. As I said, especially when it comes to Black men and the susceptibility of us getting this disease, many, for us is really a prominent in the African American man community. We see it as a violation. There's homophobia. There's all kinds of things that may prevent us from wanting to get the test, but we need to get the test, the blood test, the actual physical exam that we have to go through, and then the treatment. I know people who not only got it and was diagnosed with it, they won't go through the process of even trying to get well because they're worried about their manhood and how it might affect that, because their manhood is tied up into their physical ability or the physical inability or possibility of that in a process. And the reality is you can survive with it and live a normal life, on this side of it. They have everything in the world to help you do so, but you got to be open and willing to walk through the process. And I'm going to tell you, fear does not fix. That's all I keep saying. Fear does not fix. Just because you're scared, it's not going to make it go away. Just because you ignore it is not going to make it go away. Early detection, is the solution. So it's really not about waiting. It's about moving with urgency to make sure you don't, because if they detect it, they can deal with it, right? And that's the reality of it. So avoiding it is not going to help. And that's all I can say to our men. We got to get checked up. We got to get our physicals, and that's whether or not we talking about prostate cancer or testing your breasts and seeing if you got lumps, like whatever it is. When you have that pain, go why you have that pain, whatever that may be. Our body give us signals all the time that something's going on. And Tylenol don't take it all away.
Exactly right. And I was going to say, and I'll speak to our women, the mammograms, your annual gynecological exams, right? But I know for me, and this is me, but I pay attention to my body. Start paying attention to your body. Be mindful of your body. Your body speaks to you. Pay attention to any pains or aches. The other thing is, it could be something physical, but it could also be something emotional. It's manifesting in your body. Don't ignore it. Early detection does make a difference. So I appreciate you sharing that. So, all right. So let's talk about, for someone who's listening right now, who may be in the middle of a difficult diagnosis, caregiving journey, or season of uncertainty, what does it look like in practical and spiritual terms to be sustained one day at a time?
I think that's it. That the one day at a time is so your mind will play tricks on you, and it's so easy to get into the what if. What if, and I always, go back to let's talk about what is, not the what if, what if I have this, or what if this happened, or what if that happened, or what if will drive you mad. What is today? God is good today. This is happening today. He's in control today. My diagnosis is this today. I have to do this for me today. It's a one day at a time thing, thinking about the what if. It can be overwhelming, what's going on. But thinking about the daily grind of where you are. So for me, it was daily devotion. It was daily talking and reading. And how do you feel today? What's going on today? And it was, for me, really, it was these diaries, journaling, where I was and what I was feeling. So, I added, 20 people in this book, but the reality, I could have done this myself. I could have filled up the pages with my own stuff. I just wanted to talk to so many people from so many different places and levels, is why I do the diaries. But I have much that's written down about that journey. I have soaked pillowcases, of tears that, and it's okay. For me, it used to be, don't cry. Crying is weak. No, crying is releasing emotion, I thought crying, oh no, if you cry, you weak, cry, you sad. No, cry releases
Yeah.
this emotion, it releases stress. It's actually an outlet, right? And it's healthy.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it's actually healthy, which I
Yeah.
didn't know as well. But
Yeah.
being able to do that and finding those things, for me that minister to me. I'm a music guy, so
Yeah.
there were songs that just ministered to me during this journey. I'm a
Yeah.
fighter. I got a boxing glove on my chain. The other side of this boxing chain, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me, is written on the opposite side of that. But Rocky, the movie, in my chronicles, I run up the steps of the art museum.
That's right.
Movies, inspirational things that make you feel good in the
Yes.
midst of feeling bad, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes we think, just sleeping it away or self-medicating in some way, but finding out what inspires you,
Mhm.
what encourages you, what motivates you. I save Eagles games
Yeah.
on tape, and I rewatch. I only save the wins.
I
You know
love
what I mean? And,
it.
and I rewatch the wins. I got the Super Bowls. I rewatch
I
things that
love it.
that was able to encourage and uplift me
Yeah.
during the valleys and of life, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back to tears because um
Why you want to go back
tears
to
are a
this?
gift of God. Tears are a gift from God. There's actually a whole
Mm,
book on the theology of tears. And
really?
so, yeah, oh yes. And so I want people to know it's a release physically, but it's also a gift from God. And it says in Psalm 56:8, you keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have
Mm,
recorded each one in your book. Tears are your communication and lament with the Lord. So don't hold it
mm.
in because you got to let it out and it's good for you. So I appreciate you sharing that, especially as a man. But I also know that there are women who say, oh, I don't need to cry. I don't want to cry. Tears are a gift from God and it brings
Mm.
you closer to the Lord.
Amen. Amen.
And
Amen.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you
So
had to go back on tears. Let's keep going.
yes. So let's talk about strategies and techniques, right? So
Mm,
in many communities, the church is often the first place people turn in seasons of illness and crises. Based on what
mm.
you've seen and experienced through these stories in your book, what role should pastors and faith communities play in supporting both the spiritual and mental health needs of individuals and families navigating serious illness?
Well, I think one is just a meeting them where they are. Is really about and again, I had to grow in this. It's really about being empathetic. It's really about putting yourself in their shoes and understanding what they're going through. There's some who would just spiritualize it away,
Mhm.
and wonder, well, if you got enough faith, you shouldn't be worried about it. And you get, don't do that.
Right.
There's others who gonna tell you, well, I'm a declare that you don't have that no more.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Only God can declare that they don't have it no more. So is don't do that. Don't hurt them, more than they already hurting. Like
That's
for
right.
real. Like we really got to love them, meet them where they are, be able to understand and receive them in that journey. Don't make them be somewhere they're not.
Right.
And if it's above you and above your pay grade, send them to somebody who can actually help them.
Right.
I know, when I went to first the Fox Chase support group, and I ain't hating on them, but there was somebody in there who said something that was so out of pocket, I never went back,
Yeah.
and they said something like, yeah, once they get out that capsule, you done. Now he
Mm.
don't know. I just found out mine's got out of my capsule.
Right.
But he said that, and we're there to, for support. And he said
Right.
that. I was like, oh,
Right.
but you can get those same kind of comments in the church, well, if you don't got enough faith, that's why you got it. We can say things like that,
Right.
that can end up doing more harm than
Right.
good. And so you have people who going through some serious stuff. They'd rather go home and crawl up in a ball than be up in here made to feel bad because they're actually feeling bad or because they actually, dealing with anxiety. You know what I mean? Oh, you be anxious for nothing but in everything with prayer. But yes, that is a verse. I done recited it a million times to hold on to it, but it's not meant to be a weapon to beat me up because I'm struggling. It's meant to be something to help my toolbox and encourage me during the struggle. So how we address it, how we love them, how we empathize with them, how we help hold them when they can't hold themselves. Again, it goes with that holding up them Aaron and hers, coming alongside of them. One of the things I loved about they was doing in my sister church in North Carolina is somebody from the church would go to the doctor's appointment with you. So you didn't have to go alone. They went to the appointment with you, because I'm gonna tell you, when I heard cancer, after that, it was Charlie Brown. You read the book, it was like, after they said cancer, it was like, womp, 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 womp. Like, I didn't, from that point on, my eyes welled up, and I just heard that. And it was like, man, I don't even know what they were saying come next, what the next step was, because I was still stuck on what you just said to me.
That's right.
And so, if we're going to be of support, be there. Do you got somebody to go to an appointment with you? Do you got somebody to take notes with you, to listen with you, to talk to you, to be that person, you know what I mean, to hold you accountable during that journey so you don't fall away? Because I've seen so many people just fall away, stop answering calls, stop answering texts, because, they just didn't want to deal with it. They didn't realize that you were willing to deal with it with them. That's what we got to do. We got to deal with it with them. We can't talk at them. We got to talk to them,
Oh my, yes, I do know. And going to the doctor with them or taking notes or record, because my dad and I, after an appointment, he'll say, he said this, and I'll say, well, Dad, here's what I wrote down in the notes. So let's go back to the notes. But then now this goes back. Now I'm going to go back to something you said at the start. I was waiting to bring this back in. Advocacy, being your own advocate, and having other people talk to the listening audience about what that means about being your own advocate and having an advocate.
Yeah, I mean, again, you gotta take control, because this is your life, this is your body, And so for me, when I talk to people now, it's like, okay, your doctor said this. What did you see somebody else? Did you get a second opinion? Do you know the options when it comes to treatment? Oh, they said I should wait. Oh, did they now? Well, look here, here's the chances of, here's the things that can happen while I wait. Now, again, I can't do your cancer walk for you. And I had to learn that. Some people are going to be like, hey, I appreciate it, man, but I got fine. But I'm going to tell you what waiting would have did. Waiting would have took my life. Right. Advocacy is saying, no, doc, I'd like to get a second opinion. No, doc, I'd like to move. Oh, I want to take that test. Is there something else? Asking questions, coming in, doing your own research of what I got. What are the treatments out there? What do you suggest for this? Well, have you heard of this? Have you heard of that? I mean, every time I go to the doctor, I had a list of questions. What about? My wife had a list of questions. What about? We came in there, because this not going to just happen to us. We're not going to just lay there and be passive about something so aggressive. Right. Yeah. We got to be just as aggressive as this disease is when it comes to fighting this disease. And so this is not about being passive. I mean, I got so many men who done hit me with, yo, man, I'm so glad you said something. I went and got checked. And for no other reason, when I think about why God allowed me to have it, he knew I was going to be public. He knew I was going to be transparent. And there were individuals who said to me that they believe that me being public saved their life, because they went and got tests and they discovered they had cancer. I got guys who discovered they had cancer, but the only reason they went and got a test is because of the conversation that we had and me going public with it.
That's right. And that's what I'm hoping tonight, because we're going to have people who are listening tonight, but are also going to be watching the recording, so that, whether you watch it during the day, late at night, it is our hope that you hear us, that early detection.
Absolutely.
Right? And do not be afraid. You don't have to go alone. And there's support. And so if you have to reach out to us or to Darren Kent or Ayana with AME Zion, we all are here and we will support you. You are not alone, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So now let's go back to the church, and we think about caring for the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. What does meaningful collaboration look like between the church, pastoral counselors, licensed mental health professionals?
I think the idea of meaningful collaboration is recognizing your lane, and playing in your lane and playing in your part. And I don't think we have to poo-poo or downplay somebody else's role in that process. I think is when I talk about holistic healing, it's about utilizing all the resources you need. We need everything in order to battle this thing. We need to be treating each part of us through this journey. You know what I mean? The medical part, the physical part, the emotional part, the spiritual part, and it's working in collaboration. And so we don't have to claim to be all and to do all.
Right.
We can actually be honest about, hey, I can help you with this part of the journey, but I'm gonna suggest you go ahead and do this for that part of the journey. Right. Because there's people who say, well, what about, the holistic healing? What about, big pharma? All they trying to do is, I'm not going to argue about big pharma or whether or not you want to go to Healthway, but what I'm going to tell you, that this thing is real. If you find something that's of a natural and it helps and you see your numbers decrease, or go for it. You know what I mean? But understand, you have this over here, you're dealing with the mental, and I'm giving you scripture, but you're still depressed every day. You might need to see a therapist. You got, this you need more than what I'm giving you. I can supplement, but this idea that we are God, we're not. You know what I mean? Only he's everything. He's the only one that's omnipotent, right? You know what I mean? And so, he's the all-powerful one. He's the omniscient, the all-knowing one. We have our part and we play our part in that process. And I think that always should come with a level of humility and transparency when it comes to trying to be a system of support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that, because collaboration, your church, if you have a health and wellness ministry, if you don't, collaborate with the community and licensed professional counselors and agencies and bringing people in. Next month, May, is Mental Health Awareness Month. What are you doing in your church for mental health awareness? And Black Men Health Month is coming up, and Minority Mental Health Awareness Month is coming up. So what are you doing to increase knowledge of your congregants in your church and collaboration with the community?
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. That's good stuff.
Yeah. I love this book. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of the contributors to your book. And if you are okay with it, I would just like to say their names, because
absolutely,
their stories were, I appreciate this, sharing their stories. So survivors: Lisa Anderson King, Aaron A.B. Liner Sr., Ronald Tucker, Victor Kirk Sr., Tasha Harley Tull, Ben Moore, Nathan Sallard, Robin Walton, Denisha Horton, Rosalind Stitt, Reverend Chris Buff McNichol, Christian G. Madison. And then thank you to our caregivers: your wife, Kim Anderson, Lexine Liner, Brenda Horton, Darren Canty, Teresa Moore, R. Lynn Shumpert, Don M. Thomas, Daryl C. Dade, Michael Stitt, Dr. Cherie N. Alexander, Joseph Palin. That pronounces. Thank you all for contributing to this book, and thank you all for being a blessing for me, because what you all have shared in the book, there's different pieces that I've also shared with my dad, and he gave me permission that I could talk about his story as well tonight. So as we come to an end, Dr. Anderson, thank you again. But is there anything you would like to say or share that we haven't covered in our conversation?
I think we've done an amazing job. Thank you. You have some very, very good and insightful, thoughtful questions that made me wrestle with some things, and I appreciate that. I know, again, I just like to encourage folks, because I know people who bought it. There's so many people who told me I bought the book, but I ain't read it. I got to put myself in a mood to read it, and I like, the book is not meant to be sad. Yes, it's heavy because cancer is heavy, but it's not meant to be sad. It's meant to be encouraging. It's meant to be uplifting. But all of us know somebody with cancer,
Right.
and all of us know somebody who's caring for them. You need to get a glimpse
Yeah.
of what that's like, so
Yeah.
that you can really be a friend or a
Yeah.
cousin or a
Yeah.
relative or a co-member or sister or brother in Christ. Like, in order to really be that support, you got to have a glimpse of what they're going through.
That's
And the
right.
Cancer Diaries deal with so many different aspects of cancer and caregiving. It gives you a glimpse. Everybody's story is touched in there at some point. And
Yep.
even if you're not a reader, you know, every story is what, 3 pages or less, 4 pages or
Oh,
less,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so you go through, it's a very easy and quick read
Yeah.
that you go through. There's so much so that I say unplug for uplift. I try to stop you because people are like, oh, I read it in a day. You wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to read it in a day,
Take your time. Right.
yeah, you can, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But you're not supposed to, you know what I mean? In order to really digest it and get it and really feel it. It's like, yo. And so for those who are like, oh, I just don't like to read, it's for you too, because the more time you spend on Facebook
Yeah.
reading posts, you be done read the book in that
Yeah.
process. So
That's right.
I just encourage folks to pick it up, read it, and begin to love on themselves
Yeah.
and love on others who may be dealing with, and whether or not they're dealing with cancer or any disease, because it's really about anything in
Right.
any valley, physically, emotionally, that you're going through. And then
Right.
somebody who's loving somebody and
Yeah.
caring for that person that's going through.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Thank you, my brother. I really appreciate
Thank
you being
you.
on the
Thank you.
show. I think it was a blessing in disguise, the timing of when I saw the book, because it's been wonderful for myself, but also for my father. And then for my prayer is for our listening audience. So thank you for joining me again this evening.
Thank you for having me. You know, I'm praying for your dad, and let him know that. But yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for bringing this to the forefront. It's something that, we don't like to talk about.
Yeah.
And it definitely need to be talked about, dealt with, and detected. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. So as we close today's conversation, we are reminded that faith does not always remove the weight of what we carry, but it can sustain us within it. Whether you are navigating illness, supporting a loved one, or walking through a difficult season, you are not alone. As I shared at the beginning, this conversation is personal for me. And I know for many of you listening, it's personal for you as well. My prayer is that you are reminded you do not have to carry these seasons alone. Thank you, Dr. Larry L. Anderson Jr., for sharing this powerful work and for reminding us that healing can take many forms. Before we close, I want to invite you to join us for our next episode of Talking with Dr. T in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month. Our May conversation is titled, When Words Are Not Enough, Music as a Pathway to Healing. In this episode, we will explore the healing power of music, worship, and the arts as pathways for expression, resilience, and holistic wellness within faith communities. Joining me will be Dwayne Fulton from Mount Arab Baptist Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as we explore how the voices we carry individually and collectively can become a part of how we process life's challenges, navigate what we hold within, and move toward healing and wholeness. Until next time, remember, faith does not remove the diagnosis, but it can anchor us in the midst of it. God bless. See you next month.
That's good.